All right.
Here we go.
Welcome back to another episode of the Merge Feast. My name is Blake, and I am here with Brandon Johnson and Logan Hogmo. What's up, guys?
What's up?
What up? What up?
Man, this episode was all about the emotions of the game, and I think it did a really, really good job kind of diving into the highs, the lows, and just the roller coaster. So I'm definitely excited to get into it, and I'm curious what you guys thought. Um, Brandon, what'd you think?
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm a fan of openness and vulnerability on Survivor, and I think we saw a lot of that tonight. Like you said, a lot of people I think hit their kind of Survivor wall tonight, and just kind of got to see people um in their raw form at their worst, and see them try to figure a way out of that and turn it into something positive. I think we saw that as well. We also saw, I think, my favorite negotiation of all time. So super fun episode.
Yeah, it was like you said. I think from the start, beginning to end, was all about emotion and the highs and lows. To every decision you make is going to come back at some point. It's not going to. You're not going to make a decision and it just doesn't change the game or change your outcome in the game. And so I think seeing some of the implications of past decisions from people on the tribe and what that'll do to the game, I think is what's always fun to see and how it changes the game. Um, but yeah, it was a great episode and I'm excited to dive into it.
Let's so we don't bounce around too terribly much. Let's hop into the reward challenge first of all. So we had three teams, and they all like pushed that ball with their head while their hands and feet were tied.
Yeah, Kyle cheated though.
Yeah, I left that thinking that team definitely took advantage of the head, and let me use
The
like
the
my neck
shoulder.
and my shoulder. But Jeff didn't seem to care, and Jeff is also not shy about calling people out, saying, "Hey, you're not doing that right. Go back to the start."
I actually, I clearly Jeff didn't have a huge issue with it because he would have said something like you said. But I actually, not to jump ahead, I thought Kyle cheated on the immunity challenge too, but I went and reviewed it and he didn't. I'll get to that later. But
Okay, all right.
just some foreshadowing.
Well, and then what'd you think of Andy like biting the ball? The slow-mo and the music tied to it. I'm like, man, that I don't know.
He does some of the strangest things in challenges.
That's outside the box for sure.
He does have and he's got the just like a little bit of crazy eyes. So
Yep.
shout out to the Big Brother fans out there. That was a big moment in Big Brother this past season. One lady went like full on crazy, calling somebody crazy eyes, and it was entertaining. Um, so let's see here. Kyle, Sam, and Rachel earned reward. Did you guys think when they went back to the sanctuary that there was going to be some sort of idol advantage note? The way that they were like building up the music, I was like, something's about to happen. And then that something was Kyle turning on Gabe. And I was curious what you guys thought of that. Were you surprised by that?
No, I wasn't really. I think we talked about it last week. Of there's two idols in play currently. I think Sue, and then is it Rachel that has one?
Sue and Rachel. Yep.
Yeah. So Sue and Rachel each have one, and outside of that, I don't think there's anything else out there advantage wise. But I don't feel like they'll put anything in or in the game unless one of the idols gets played. But outside of that, I wasn't necessarily expecting anything.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting anything either, just based off of kind of what we talked about last week. If there was going to be some sort of advantage, I think it would be a steal a vote, unless, like you just said a second ago, Logan, an idol gets played, it might go back into circulation. I don't know if we're too late in the game though at this point.
Yeah.
To do that, but Kyle, the big moment being Kyle kind of turning on Gabe, surprised me a little bit because I thought they were pretty tight. But I also love the thought process and the idea of only one of us can win, and knowing that Gabe's a strong player, and clearly the rest of the tribe thinks Gabe's a strong player. Like, I need to go after him before he goes after me. So,
Well, and really, and I know we've talked about how we don't put a ton of weight on immunity challenges as much, but other than the only other person to win an immunity idol was Gabe, and that was the one where it was a guy and a girl, and so it was Gabe and Sue, right? Because that was the same. I think that was the same week. I could be wrong.
Gabe won last week, on his own.
That's right. Okay,
Yeah.
so Kyle won with Sue. So really, the only time that Kyle hasn't won, Gabe has.
Was last week. Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah, the other kind of dynamic there. So it was obviously pretty quickly turned into, hey, let's make Gabe a target. We weren't sure if that was going to switch over to Kyle until we figured out who won immunity. But the other kind of names that came up really quickly, I want to talk about Genevieve and Teeny and the dynamic there, and then I also want to talk about how Andy is playing right now. So let's start with Genevieve and Teeny, because that kind of picks up from last week and the aftermath. Teeny was kind of a cool story this week, but curious what you think of, or what you thought of that friendship or dynamic or alliance, Brandon.
Well, I think Teeny clearly was emotional about it and felt slighted by Genevieve, right? And kind of thought that Genevieve had different motivations for the vote than she actually did. So one, I didn't realize that Genevieve and Teeny were tight. I don't know if I missed that. I don't know where you guys were on that. But Teeny took it a little more personal than I feel like you maybe should have. And maybe it just being left out and not feeling like, or feeling like you had enough trust in Genevieve to be in on that vote and not sway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I understand Teeny and Saul, they were, tight. They were each other's number one, but a little bit of a weird reaction.
Yeah. When it almost seemed like it wasn't because she was left out of the vote, but she almost took it as, you left me out of the vote to make me look stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, in kind of a weird way, that Teeny and Sue are playing a very similar game, as far as like playing very emotionally and taking things personal. Now, I think Teeny is much more likable than Sue personally. Kind of got to see the nasty side of Sue this week in regards to Kyle.
Ways.
Yeah. But we can get to that later. But it was, I don't know.
There was nothing abnormal about how that went down. Genevieve wanted to make a move on Saul, and Teeny is Saul's number one. That is That's textbook Survivor. That if you're going to pull a blindside on a person you're voting out, you're also going to pull a blindside on their number one or their alliance, right? Because you don't want them to start to get uncomfortable and scramble and try to come up with a plan. So, like, it's just weird for how big of a fan of the game Teeny is to come to what I thought was a wild conclusion that Genevieve was trying to humiliate Teeny.
Yeah.
Like, given everything we know about Genevieve to this point, she's clearly like, her intention is obviously like, I'm doing whatever I need to do to get to the end, but it feels like she's doing it in a, graceful way, right? So
So I think part of the problem too is that Teeny and Genevieve are playing two drastically different games. I mean, Genevieve specifically said, I'm trying so desperately hard to not like get emotionally involved with anyone because it hurts and it makes the game harder. So if I'm not emotionally invested with anybody, I can vote off who I need to move myself forward, and I'm okay with that. But you could kind of see how she does seem to care about Teeny and was like, whoa, that this is making this move a heck of a lot harder. And she even admitted, like, I knew I kind of burned some bridges there, but I didn't realize that she was going to take it so personally. And that caught Genevieve off guard and was like, man, that I thought through everything, but I didn't think through that. And I don't know. It was just kind of a cool little dynamic there where you see, two people playing kind of on the same side, but two drastically different ways. And as smart as Genevieve is, the fact that she didn't think through that portion of it means like you literally cannot think through every aspect of the game and every consequence of your decisions. It's literally impossible. So it was kind of a cool moment to start off the episode of one that was full of emotion. What what'd you guys think of Andy this week?
Andy is a I I kind of see where Brandon's coming from in the past of where he can kind of make it to the end and be a player and a chance to win. I think he is playing really hard and trying to stir things up to a point. He's trying to get in with everybody. Um, I don't know. I think he's going to get himself in trouble if he's not careful, though. Talking to everybody, being in an alliance with everybody. I mean, we've seen that in the past where you go and talk to somebody and then a few minutes later they talk to somebody else and they're like, wait, he told me this, he told me that. And it things don't align there. And I think if he's not careful, he can get himself in trouble. But I think he's setting himself up to a point decently and having options open, I guess, if that makes sense.
The only part that I disagree with there is he's I don't well, maybe I don't disagree, but I don't know that he's necessarily going to get himself into trouble because he's not the one that is throwing out names. He's just going along with what everybody says. And if I think when he was talking to Sue and Sue had brought up Kyle, and then he was like, yeah, Kyle's been saying this about you. And if you paid attention, he's like that with everybody. Okay, hey, what's your idea? Yeah, I love it. Let's do it. He's not the one throwing out ideas. And so I think that might be his saving grace. The only problem is if he makes it to the end, which he very well could, the way he's positioning himself, is he going to be able to speak to how he played? And is everybody going to view his game as good as it has been? I don't know. And it doesn't seem like people really respect him much. And so that's what I'm fearful of for him.
I'm in the same boat with Blake. Obviously, you guys know I'm a fan of Andy. I've been defending him for weeks on this show, but I think he's doing a good job of kind of being the middleman and not necessarily being the one to start a plan, but definitely being somebody that's willing to work with you and go with it and help build on that plan. And I think, like you said, Blake, I think he might think that that's a great plan, but I think he might have trouble explaining that to the jury because the jury might just see him as a pawn in the game, some sort of chess piece that, we're just using you as a number. We're making you feel super important along the way. So I think he's going to make it to the end, but he has kind of 0 vote finalist written all over him, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in taking third, but
Yeah, I definitely could see that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's talk about the immunity challenge, and it kind of the beginning is it's the rice negotiation. So the challenge was they had to balance a ball on a flat disc, and then every so many minutes you add in another ball up to 3. So it's kind of a balancing act. And then the rice negotiation. So there's 8 people left, or was there 9?
there were 9 today.
Uh,
Yeah, Gabe was the 10th person voted out, third member of the jury. There's 8 people left.
so who? Okay, I must be doing my math wrong. But anyway, Jeff needed 4 people to sit out of the challenge. So I was thinking that was half of the people. So, and nobody seemed to want to sit out. Usually, you have somebody saying like, "Hey, I'll sit out," and we didn't. So I'm curious, Brandon. You said that this was one of your favorite negotiations ever. So hit me with it. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Well, it was because it was outside of the box, right? So usually, you have Jeff typically, I feel like, starts at 4 on this. And I think Gabe offered, hey, can we do 3? Which, I don't know. I guess you got to start somewhere. But then Caroline, and we've already seen Shot in the Dark evolve in this season, the way that Rachel used it to kind of gauge the temperature of the tribe during tribal council as to whether or not she needed to play her idol. And now we're seeing it used in a different way. Caroline kind of started it by saying, hey, Jeff, what if 2 of us, was it 2 of us or 4 of us give Shot in the Dark? Either way, she was like, what if some of us give your Shot in the Dark? And Jeff was like, no. And then Kyle came in and was like, what if we all give you Shot in the Dark? And Jeff perked up, and pretty much everybody was on board but Sam. But I loved it because, again, it's just kind of outside the box. Like when you're in a challenge, you're not really thinking about your Shot in the Dark because that's something that, that's your last hope. That's your Hail Mary, as they say. And I at that point in the day when you're at the challenge, you're competing for immunity and not necessarily thinking like, I'm super vulnerable and I'm going to need to play this tonight. So I loved it. Just another way for the Shot in the Dark's value kind of rising, and I think being a more pivotal part of the game, because I think you could argue that to this point, outside of Caleb playing a Shot in the Dark properly in season 45, like it's kind of a pointless, like not very exciting item. So I love seeing it used in a negotiation tactic because usually you're just negotiating people and maybe food or something.
Yeah, I thought it was really clever, and for them to, I was honestly really surprised everybody was on board except for Sam right off the bat with giving up the Shot in the Dark. I think there were a few people, Genevieve especially, that as soon as she didn't win immunity and then got back to camp and people weren't talking to her as much, kind of regretted that almost immediately. And like Brandon said, when you're in the challenge and you have a bag of rice that's going to get you through the end of the game, you're not thinking about where am I at, what's going on. And I think that's where Sam did a really good job of kind of like, hang on, let me kind of think about a few things here. And I think I probably would have been in the same boat as Sam of literally everybody in the tribe is wanting the rice. If I say no, I'm not giving my shot in the dark up, I'm clearly going to be a target. Like, people aren't going to want to keep me around. So he almost was forced to. But no, I thought it was pretty brilliant or really cool to see them throw out the shot in the dark or something else.
And I think it's a fair value, because when you think about it, like, number one, it's a 1 in 6 shot if you play your shot in the dark, if you being safe at tribal council. Number two, like, there's 18 players in each season, and I don't think we've seen more than like 3 players in a season use their shot in the dark. So
Well,
it's not
because
like
you
all
lose your
9 of
vote.
them. Yeah.
Like, that's the ultimate downside. I think we would see way more people play it all the time if you didn't lose your vote, or if you also had a chance of losing your vote or a chance of keeping your vote, I guess. But I think that's why we don't see it played much. So sorry to cut you off, but that was like, I liked the move, but I also didn't like it, because I don't know that I would give my shot in the dark up, but I also don't know that I would play my shot in the dark ever, because I would lose my vote. So it was kind of a weird thought process.
It is tough, because it is one of those things where, like, today you could feel like, oh, I'm not gonna need to play that, I'm sitting pretty, and then next time, next tribal council, you're like, holy crap, things have changed, and I really wish I had that right now. And I know that's how Genevieve felt tonight. So
Yeah, and in the sense of not Blake saying not play, or not sure if you would play it because you lose your vote there. If you know everybody's voting for you, at that point there's no downside to giving up your vote, because
yeah,
100%. But how many times has somebody been voted out this season and had an idea that everybody was voting for them? That just hasn't happened. Like,
this
it's
season, yeah. I think in season past it's been a little bit clearer, but
for sure.
I get what you're saying there.
I mean, if there's a blind side there at all, it's like, man, I can't play this, or I won't want to. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
I definitely think it would have to be the right situation to want to play that. And that's where, I mean, Rachel's move 2 weeks ago was so brilliant that she played that and was fine kind of throwing it away. Like, if she got safety, cool. If not, she uses it as a tool to gauge everybody else's, reaction. So, but we're also running out of things to negotiate with Jeff. Because it used to be, hey, I need 6 people to sit out. And they're like, how about 2? And then going back and forth. And now it's like, nope, you're sitting out 4, or we're not doing this. And
Yeah,
we're kind of getting creative. Like, okay, shot in the dark, that'll probably come up again next season. But if he's like, no, I'm not taking that either, what else are you going to be able to offer him? Because it is a negotiation, but Jeff would kind of drew that line in the sand really early that I'm not negotiating. And then, Caroline kind of caught him off guard.
Yeah. And I would imagine, I don't think Jeff's just going to jump a shot in the dark. Like, if they're like, well, what if we all do our shot in the dark? Like in season 48, I don't think Jeff's going to take that. Right. So I don't know if, like, they unintentionally broke the rice negotiation challenge today, or if Survivor will, like, figure something else out to do with it.
Yeah. Because you obviously want to make it painful. Like, it shouldn't be easy for the entire tribe to get rice. But at the same time, like, I want there to be some sort of a negotiation there, because I like that. But I don't know. It was fun.
Yep.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask what you thought of Gabe talking Kyle into it.
Talking Sam into it.
Sam, yes, sorry.
So I think he did a great job. And you kind of brought it up earlier. The big downside of playing your shot in the dark is losing your vote, right? I think Gabe did a great job of explaining, like, you need to use your vote. That's your voice in the game. That's your power. And we talk about that on the show all the time, because we, or at least I gripe about votes being lost often. So I thought whether or not Sam wants to admit that Gabe did persuade him, I think he very much at least got Sam to just say yes.
What's funny about that is I think that potentially got Gabe sent home. Like, not necessarily directly. They didn't vote him out this week because of that. But if Sam didn't sit out, the tribe didn't get Rice, and I think things could have gone a totally different direction. Um, Especially if he thought he was on the bottom to play his shot in the dark. Like, that could have gone totally different. Maybe not, but I think that definitely played a factor.
So, obviously, earlier in the show, I accused Kyle of cheating twice. So, I want to explain it. I know we're not on video, but at least, the audience can't see us. You guys can see me. But I didn't quite pay attention to like what the rules were, but I noticed that every player but Kyle and Teeny were holding the plate, the tray, just by their hand, right? And balancing it that way, which is significantly harder. And I noticed that Kyle and Teeny had the tray on their hand and up on their forearm, and which would make that obviously significantly easier to balance. So I watched the challenge, and then I was like, and it really stuck out when it was just Kyle and Sue, because Sue almost was like holding it by her fingertips, and Kyle had it on his hand and up on his wrist. So I went back and rewatched the rules, and Jeff didn't say anything about not being able to do that. And even in the example of that they show you, like, this is how the challenge works, the person doing the example had it on their hand and their wrist. So Kyle was not cheating. It was fair game. I think he was just the only one that thought to do that, but that might be why he's winning immunity challenges for the fourth time.
I noticed, now that you say that, I don't know if it was Kyle or who, but I noticed somebody having almost it sitting on their like forearm, and I was like, ooh, like that actually would make sense of being a little bit easier, but
Yeah, I did not realize that. I just looked up a picture of it, and that's definitely true. The only thing that I was thinking about is how people were standing. Like, some people were standing face on, some people were standing like facing to the side. So I thought that might have been what you were talking about. But yeah, you're right. He did have it resting on his forearm, and that's interesting.
he also, I think, did a really good job, because it seemed like a lot of other people had their arm sitting out, where he had his arm like tucked into his side a little bit, to where it wasn't so much he's just holding his hand out there and his arm's getting fatigued. He's almost able to kind of rest that on it, on his and have more stability there, which I think is just smart. I don't think that was necessarily against like rules or anything there, but he's clearly playing challenges smart, and goes to show that, I mean, he's winning quite a few there.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if that challenge ever comes up again, which odds are that it will, if they add to the rules of it and are like, all right, you can only hold it by your fingertips or by your hand. It can't touch anything else. You can't tuck your arm in. You can't have it resting anywhere else. You can only have it on your hand. So that'll be something I'll be paying attention to if it comes up again.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think Logan and I say it all the time, but if you're not cheating, you're not trying. I think that's what we mean by that, is if it's not explicitly against the rule, it's fair game. And even though it's not what everybody else is doing, that's not what was expected, the opportunity was there and you take advantage of it, and kind of exploiting the holes in the game. And if that's what he's doing, and he, based on the reward challenge, it almost seemed like it, I mean, it's clearly working for him. And until they close up those loopholes, it's fair game. And he's
Yep.
just the only one taking advantage of it. So let's see here. Before we get to tribal, did anybody's stock go up or down like drastically this week? For me, the biggest swing in the game was probably Sam and Genevieve. I think Sam may have felt like he was on the bottom more than he actually was, but I don't know. But he seemed to definitely move up, and Genevieve the complete opposite. I mean, like roller coaster high to low last week to this week. But I don't know that her game is in the tank. But she was really the only one that moved a ton for me, unless there's somebody else that I'm missing.
Yeah, Genevieve's definitely went down. Obviously, people are noticing what she's doing, and I think we said it last week that it was only a matter of time before people start to look at her. But I almost wonder, like, if Kyle is to lose immunity next week, do they put Genevieve on the back burner and go for Kyle, right? I know we say, like, oh, you don't really value challenges that much, but you got to get him while you can, because clearly no one's beating him. And as for Sam, I don't know if Sam's stock really has, like, it's kind of the same. I agree with you, Blake, that, like, I don't think he's as low as he thinks he is. Like, obviously, he went from top guy in Gata to just kind of average Joe in the post merge. Plus, he lost his number one ally, so it can feel worse than it is. I think Caroline's went up a little bit for me, just because she wasn't the first person to bring up Gabe, obviously, but she was so Tuku strong to this point, and she saw that the best thing for her game was to go ahead and vote Gabe out. I'll be interested to see kind of the aftermath of Caroline and Sue. Like, if Sue's going to feel backstabbed by that. I mean, Sue's still stewing about Kyle writing her name down on day 2. So is Caroline going to be able to weasel her way out of that? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's going to be really interesting what's going to happen to that 3 now left with Sue, Caroline, and Kyle, because I think Sue and Gabe were the closest there, and to see kind of how that all changes or what's going to happen there, I'll be curious to see that, because you could tell Sue was pretty upset, and it almost seemed like in Tribal, when I guess kind of jumping ahead here, but like she heard somebody say something like who came up with the plan or whatever, and so I'll be curious to see how that changes.
Yeah, Caroline is a really interesting one for me because she's not out there making big moves. She's not. I mean, she's not at the level of Genevieve as far as flashy moves go. But when she sees her opportunity to go a direction, she knows when. Like, what was the example or the saying that they used last week? Like, what is an actual plan and what is just noise?
Mm-hmm.
And she is able to decipher that really, really well and jump on board when necessary. But she's also, I think she is smart enough to be able to explain that in a way that makes her game seem probably better than it actually was, where, hey, I played a brilliant game even though I wasn't the one calling the shots the whole time. So I'm with you. I think next week seeing the fallout between her and Sue is going to be pretty telling on how and if she's able to overcome that. Maybe this is cocky of me, but I feel like that would be fairly easy to overcome. And it's like, hey,
I
It was thrown around. I wasn't sure if this was legit or not. I found out very last minute and I didn't have a chance to tell you. I'm so sorry. I'm still with you 100%. What do you want to do next? Like, let's make a move now. And I think it would be over and done with. But we also see how emotionally charged Sue is.
yeah, I think it'll be easy for Caroline, because Sue, let's say that she wants to cut off Caroline. I don't think Sue's gonna be able to rally the troops to get Caroline. I don't think she has enough stock in the game or enough people that want to work with her.
She kind of
to-
cornered herself into her alliance. Yeah.
Mhm.
And like we said last week, she was very well insulated, but that's falling apart really quickly. And just because you have people around you that don't want you out doesn't mean you have people around you that are willing to work with you.
Mhm.
That's a totally different thing.
Yeah, and like, yeah, it's tough. It's tough for Sue. I think one of you guys said it a few weeks ago. She's got kind of an old school mindset as far as how she's playing the game. Because like her whole, like, just not to beat a dead horse, but like her whole reasoning for wanting to vote out Kyle is, from what I can tell and what the editors today made very clear, it's he wrote her name down, and that's not going to be enough to convince people to go with you to vote somebody.
Especially
Problem
week
is-
one.
Yeah.
Well, there's 15 people. Sorry, I was counting. 15 people have had their name written down, right? 15 people have had their name written down. So they'd be like, all right, join the club. We got jackets. Like, get over it.
The
But,
problem is Kyle's not doing a good enough job of taking the target off of his back by continuously winning immunity challenges. I mean, he made it clear today, or Jeff did, that this is his fourth one,
mhm.
and there's an elite group of people that have won 5, and
Yeah.
I don't know who those people are, but has anyone won 6?
Mm,
I feel like what season, the first season that Ozzy was in there, he was pretty dominant. I don't remember how many he won. That's one that sticks out kind of off the bat for me, but I don't know.
so, um, so, Tom and Mike Holloway, Tom Westman and Mike Holloway. Tom's from like Survivor Panama, like season 10 or something. And then Mike Holloway is from, I think he's from Blue Collar, White Collar, No Collar. He's won 5. But then you just have like a bunch of people have won 4.
So wait, you said
Tony.
there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people that have won 5,
Okay.
at least from what I'm looking at.
Oh, here we go. Okay, I'm with you. Yeah.
With like Ozzy in season 13, Terry in season 12, Colby Donaldson in season 2, Tom Westman in season 10, Mike Holloway in season 30, and then Brad Culpepper in season 34. And then, yeah, a ton of people won 4. Obviously, a ton of people won 3.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody's won 6. So he has the potential. Like, that would be. At this point, I kind of hope he does win 6.
I mean, the only way that it's going to sound kind of dumb, but the only way that he does is if he just keeps winning. Because if he if he doesn't, the reason I say that is because if he
Here's your
doesn't,
sign.
the reason I say that is because if he doesn't, he's going to get voted out.
Yeah, but the counter argument there is this is really the first week that he's played anything social that we've seen. I mean, him throwing out Gabe's name was his first like social move of the game, other than just kind of going along with what everybody else said and voting where his alliance said that they were going to vote. So,
And
there are definitely bigger threats out there if they are not scared of him walking to the end in challenges.
so, but I think you bring up a good point there about him, like really with Gabe being the only strategy talk that we've really seen from him, other than just kind of going through the motions. Maybe somebody next week, maybe Kyle's vulnerable next week, but they go, he doesn't have a game other than winning challenges. And we've been saying it all season long. They don't care. That's not a winning game. So maybe he's not as big of a threat as we think he is.
Yeah.
So,
especially with Genevieve still being there, the fallout with Sue and Caroline could get really interesting. And Sam's obviously feeling like he's on the bottom. There are definitely plenty of other options that are out there, even if Kyle is vulnerable. So I'll be curious to see it. But I do hope that he wins at least 6 immunity idols. That would be really cool. I'm always a kind of person who wants to see the best to ever do it and somebody to break records, and so I'm rooting for him.
yeah. And I mean, I think, not to say that the other people on the season can't win challenges, but there's nobody outside of Sue and Gabe, who's gone now, that are really giving Kyle a run for his money on these challenges. So I think he's got as good of an opportunity as anyone to do
The
it.
only other person I think could be Sam. I think Sam has some chances, but he clearly hasn't won anything yet. But I don't know. I think he's.
I don't know. Like, Sam looks like the type of player, like he looks like a certain type of player. Like he's, a fit dude that looks like he should be challenge beast, physical threat, but he really hasn't been that. He's been kind of, strategy guy and social guy. So, like, and that obviously that's not a knock on him. It's just kind of, he has an archetype, or at least a look on the surface that isn't actually who he is.
Yeah. Well, but then and this is going to sound really obvious, but I think it's going to come down to what the challenges are. I mean, you saw in, was it the reward challenge where they had to roll those balls into the little hole, and he did it. I mean, Sam had the longest roll and he did it first try. So it's like it could come down to something that he just gets really lucky on, or he is just really good at one thing and could squeak it out. So
Kyle has a bad day or slips on it if it's windy or rainy. I mean, you just never know. But
I have really enjoyed the challenges this season. Maybe I'm crazy, but even the ones that seem like they are similar from past seasons, there's been a new element to them. Because we've seen the one today where you like push the ball with your head. We've seen a version of that, but then I don't think we saw the part where you roll the ball into that little hole. So it seems like every time they kind of bring an aspect back, and it feels like an old game that we've seen or an old challenge that we've seen, there's a new aspect to it, and I've really enjoyed that this season.
Yeah, I think they do a good job of keeping it fresh and keeps it interesting for sure.
Well, shoot, after what's his name 3D printed all the puzzles, they had to start switching stuff up a little bit.
That's true.
Who was that? What was his name?
Carson.
Carson, that's right. Yeah.
Can we talk about Sue for a second? Obviously with the whole Kyle situation, but did you guys feel like she just looks like she just rolled around in a pile of dirt?
Dude,
she looks a little dirty, and I can't tell if that's respectfully because she's older and is super tan and is like kind of got that leathery skin, but she just seems like she's not clean all the time.
Yeah.
Compared to everybody else, there's no way that she's showing dirt that much compared to everyone else. She's Must be afraid of the ocean, honestly. Like,
Oh, that's what Celeste said that after the immunity challenge, she was like, "How is she so dirty? They were just standing there." So, like,
yeah.
yeah,
I-
she's going through it.
me and Sydney were both cracking up the entire episode. Anytime she popped up, it was just like, did you just grab dirt and throw it in your face? Like, what is going on?
Speaking of being messy, I always love when they get rice
Mhm.
and they're eating off of the leaves, and it's just like they're just going to town. Rice is all over their face, and it's always funny to watch them dig in after what's 18 days. So it's kind of funny. Let's talk tribal. Obviously, Gabe goes home, but did did you think there was a chance that Genevieve went home? And I mean, it seemed pretty obvious that it was between Genevieve and Gabe. Do you guys have like a thought one way or the other? Were you expecting that? What were you hoping for? What do you think, Logan?
For me, I was hoping it was going to be Genevieve. I obviously had Gabe on my team that I drafted at the beginning of the season, so wanted to keep him there. And I liked Gabe. I think he was playing a really good game and setting himself up for the final really, really well. Um, so I was hoping it was going to be Genevieve going home, but I expected it to be Gabe going into it, just the way everybody was talking. And yes, Genevieve is a threat, but I think we can get her out later where Gabe is. We've got to take the shot. We've got the opportunity. We've got to hit it right now.
Yeah, I just the way they were talking about Gabe and how big of a threat he is. And sometimes as a viewer, like I'm like, Gabe's not that big of a threat. Like, what am I missing here? But then I'm like, okay, if everyone that is actually playing the game and is there and sees all the things that we don't see, like clearly he's a threat, right? So I'm wasn't surprised by the vote. I didn't want Genevieve to go home because I think her game is way more interesting than Gabe's, and I want to keep kind of seeing where that story goes. Gabe always felt like he talked a big game, but didn't really do much with it. At least that's kind of how I saw him. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
kind of got the sense that Gabe thought he was playing a much, much better game than he actually was, or that I thought he was.
agreed.
He's and not necessarily in a bad way or as a pointed comment, but I mean, he wasn't like um, I'm not saying like he was cocky. I don't think
It's
he
just
was
like
as good as
unwarranted confidence almost.
yeah, he was. I don't think he was as good as he thought he was,
Mhm.
and I'll be curious to see kind of what Twitter and the rest of Survivor fans have to say about it. But I mean, even when he left, he told Jeff, "I'll be back." I'm like, well, yeah, we'll see. Slow your roll.
Yeah, that is kind of like
But I do like Gabe, or I did like Gabe, and he seemed to leave with class and not super bitter about everything, other than the little comment to Caroline.
and I don't
But
even think that was like meant to be like negative. I think he was just like, you got a little snake in you, like playfully. But
gotcha.
I think potentially, I think he indirectly set off what could be a rift between Caroline and Sue, which I think we've talked about on the show before. Like, kind of wish that when somebody gets voted off, they would just get up and leave
Yeah.
and not say anything.
I also wish that you could that we got a sense of what the jury was thinking or talking about a little bit more. There was a part where you could see Sierra and Saul kind of whispering to each other. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but I kind of wish got a sense of what they were talking about. Sometimes we do, but I'm seeing that a little bit more. So sometimes I wish that. But I am curious what you guys thought about Rachel wanting Genevieve out first. Um, I have a hard time wrapping my head around when there are two names coming up and you're okay with both of them going out, which Rachel seemed to be okay with Gabe, but preferred Genevieve go home first. Like, what does that matter? Like, what does that get you other than, hey, I think I might be able to work with Gabe and I can't with Genevieve? I just didn't. She seemed to be making, for lack of better words, a little bit of a fuss over nothing if she was okay with either one of them going home.
So I think I think for me, you probably are if you have two names, Genevieve and Gabe, obviously in this scenario, um, where you're like, yeah, they're both threats. I'm fine with both of them going home. I think then you have to kind of weigh out what type of player they are and how they can benefit your game. And I think for Rachel, it was probably her seeing what Genevieve has done. Genevieve's a little bit sneaky, is able to kind of rally different people, not necessarily tied to one alliance. She can do a lot of different things. She goes and thinks in ways that a lot of people don't, and goes after people in ways that you wouldn't typically see. So I think it's the fear and the unpredictability of what Genevieve's game is, and
Yeah.
where Gabe, for me, like, he's kind of tied to some people, or like he was going to go where Caroline and Sue went, right? So I think I think yeah, I'm okay with either of them, but I personally, if I'm Rachel, I'm more afraid of her deciding to come after me, and I don't want that, where maybe she didn't feel like Gabe would ever go after her.
I guess that's true. And I mean, we just got through saying that Genevieve is playing a much better game than Gabe was. I think really the only thing that Gabe seemed to have that Genevieve doesn't is kind of a core alliance with, which fell apart this week, obviously, but Genevieve doesn't have what seems to be a number one, or even a number two. I mean, there's nobody there, and Gabe seemed to have a strong core of people around him. That was really the only thing, but I guess that's true. She definitely seemed to be playing the better game, and I think Genevieve even stated it, something about like the tallest piece of grass gets cut off, and how she really grew last week. And it was, I don't know, kind of a cool analogy, and it's very very accurate. She knew there was going to be a target on her back after last week, and she was able to overcome it. So I think I have a hard time believing that she is going to be target number one again next week. Um, so hopefully she lays low enough that she continues to move on, because I do hope to see her at the end.
Yeah, what do you guys think? Um, just looking at the the sneak peek of next week's episode, um, it was kind of Andy, right? That was highlighted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember. Honestly, I don't really remember a lot of it, other than like, yeah, Andy was kind of the focus. That can mean a lot of different things the way Andy's playing, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
And honestly, yeah, I mean, considering like last week they were really playing up Sue and how much she hates Kyle. That was the scenes from next episode, and that was a giant nothing burger today. So could just be nothing, but
Yeah.
I'm wondering if like this would honestly just be cool if like Andy and Teeny were like, hey, let's come together and do something.
Yeah. It's always kind of funny looking back at the episode. it's like, oh, it was all so obvious. I mean, between Genevieve and Gabe, it's like Genevieve was like, I'm super worried. I'm afraid that it's me. And even as he was reading off the votes, she's like, I'm going home. And Gabe was like, I've never been more confident.
Mhm.
I if I make it past this vote, and I might not, but I'm pretty confident. Like I'm going to get to the end if I make it past this vote. And it always seems like as soon as you're confident, you're gone.
Yeah.
And I don't know, looking back, it's like, man, that was pretty obvious the way they spun that. And so I'll be curious to see uh, how that is next week with Andy. But
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
we were sitting there watching, and I even said, "Don't get too confident, because when you get confident, that's when it comes back to bite you."
yep.
yeah. I think they've done a really good job this season as far as the editing goes to kind of keep us guessing. I've in prior seasons, and maybe it's just better gameplay as well, but in prior seasons I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on who's going home, where like even with it being two people, Gabe and Genevieve, I was still like, this is what I think is going to happen, but is there some stuff that they didn't show us that it's going to be the opposite? So obviously that's good for production because that keeps us interested and, you know, makes the show not feel stale.
Yeah. Okay, so we have 8 people left now.
Yep.
We got Teeny, Rachel, Andy, Sue, Genevieve, Kyle, Caroline, and Sam. Not who you want to win, not who you pick to win. Who has the best shot right now? And not even like Vegas odds like we talked last week, but just gut reaction. Who has the best shot of winning? Brandon.
Who has the best shot of winning? Okay. You know, it's I kind of have
Are
I
you
have
between 8 people?
I'm between 8 people. I have right now I have 3 people that I'm thinking of. Um which I know isn't what you asked, but I think Andy, Rachel, and Sam, the 3
Mhm.
remaining GATA members, if the season ended to like, well, okay, I can't play that because if the season ended tonight, none of them would win. But um, I think just looking at all of the other players that I think are going to go after each other, and then you're going to have not weaker players because I think every player is pretty dang good this season, but players that maybe aren't on the top of the list. And Andy, Rachel, and Sam kind of fit that bill for me. Like I would not be surprised um, if like I'll just pick Rachel. I would not be surprised if Rachel won.
That's who I was going to pick. Honestly, it's not necessarily who I want to win, but man, she's sitting so well. She's playing so smart. The fact that nobody knows she has an idol, uh, I don't know. I feel like she's going to let the chaos ensue around her and then come out at final 5 and drop her idol, get to final 4, and she's going to be sitting really, really well. So um, that was kind of my gut reaction this week out of nowhere because I haven't really had her as much on my radar as some other people. And not that she did anything to really stand out this week, but I don't know. She's just kind of playing that perfect middle of the road, and that's kind of who I was thinking.
Whenever you asked that question, I had the immediate thought of Rachel or, um, I think Caroline. I could see. I don't know if she has enough of big moves or moves out there, but I think she's smart, and I could see her making a push towards the end. But my initial thought was Rachel, especially with having the idol and the way she's been playing. I think, yeah, that would be my choice. Would be Rachel.
Yeah, I think I know we already talked about Caroline a little bit, but I think she's like an interesting case because I think she's a solid pick for you, Blake, to win the game. But I'm like, I like her game, but I'm just like waiting. I'm waiting and
Mhm.
waiting and waiting for like her to do something. And I think maybe tonight we are going to see her be able to open up her game since she's not, depending on what happens between her and Sue, like she's not tied to that anymore and what they want to do. And she can kind of start to do her own thing and, control her own destiny.
Yeah. I feel like she's going to do even better the less and less people that are in the game. Just she'll have a little more focus, a little more direction, not be, you know, there's not 12 people to try and figure out what everybody's going to do. So I don't know. I have high hopes, but all right. Well, last thing on my list is Survivor of the Week, and obviously that is kind of based on gameplay this week. Who was the standout player? And that's kind of a different question than the question I just asked, where Rachel is my answer. So I'm not picking Rachel. Um, but Logan, do you have a Survivor of the Week this week?
Um, for me, I was kind of between two people, and it wasn't one that I thought was like just clear and had a great week. I think Sam and Andy kind of stuck out to me for some reason. I think Sam with working with Teeny and some of those people that are on the bottom and trying to come together there and make some moves there. I think he kept talking about how low or on the bottom he was, but I think that helped kind of jumpstart the next step of the game for him. It wasn't anything that I think he did necessarily this week in result for that, but kind of setting him up for going forward. And then Andy, I saw him in a different light this week. But for me, I think Sam, just from what he was trying to do and going forward, for me that was just is who I came up with.
Something you said there made me think. Do you think that Sam might be downplaying his game and talking about him being on the bottom as part of his strategy?
I could see it.
Always a possibility.
I also think anytime your number one gets voted out, you feel very much on the bottom and can feel pretty alone, especially if you don't have anybody else to go to. Um, but that very much a possibility.
So I was between two people this week as well, two different players from Logan. But I was between Caroline and Kyle. And honestly, my reasoning for both of them is pretty much the same. To this point, they've been Tuku strong in almost just kind of going with the motions, not necessarily, taking big risks, just kind of playing safe. Both of them obviously playing good games. Caroline playing, I think, better than Kyle. But uh, them both seeing that, okay, Kyle or Gabe is a big threat, and I know he's with us, and it'll make our alliance weaker, but we got to go after him while we can. I think going for that is a huge risk to you because, if the rest of the alliance or majority is not with you, then they're just going to turn and go after you. But I'll give it to Kyle because I think Gabe was kind of his number one if Kyle really had a number one, but also because Kyle is on the verge of history, winning his fourth immunity challenge and hopefully his fifth at least to tie that record. So I'm going with Kyle this week.
Yeah, I like both of your reasonings for everybody that you named. I'm actually gonna steal one from each of you. So Kyle and Andy, actually. Andy didn't necessarily do anything like noteworthy or game changing for this episode. However, I'm with you, Logan. I saw him in a completely different light this week, and he is setting himself up to make it to the end. May not be to win it, but he is setting himself up very, very well to get to the end. And so I thought that was good, even though it wasn't like a direct impact to this episode and who went home. But I mean, Kyle was the first person to throw out Gabe's name. He won another immunity challenge and kind of controlled it. He was the first person to knock over that domino that set up the chain of events for Gabe to go home. And so I feel like I've got to give it to Kyle. But it was kind of interesting how they were both incredibly close last week. And they even said they've grown really close over the last couple of days. And then they both thought, oh man, I've got to go after the other one. And I think very easily, if Kyle didn't win this week, he was potentially going home because Gabe was coming after him. So, and obviously Sue wanted him out. I think everybody would have. So that's why Kyle would be my survivor of the week.
I like it.
All right. Well, that is all I have, unless you guys have anything else.
I'm not sure if you guys, I'm sure you guys saw it, the kind of at the very end of the episode, they dedicated to Barb. Did you guys know who that was or know anything about that?
I did not.
I saw Mike Bloom tweet about who it was.
Okay.
Yes. So Mike Bloom, big Survivor guy, tweeted out and said, for those who were unaware, this season or this Survivor 47 episode was dedicated to Jeff's mom, Barb Probst, who passed away 2 weeks ago, just before her 86th birthday.
Oh, dang.
So I thought that was cool. And for people that weren't aware of that or what, because I wasn't myself and I just saw that. So that I thought that was a big point to just bring up and make sure people were aware of that. But that's who that was.
Yeah, I did not realize that.
So, but other than that, I don't have anything.
All right. Well, Brandon, did we get any emails?
No mail.
Dang it.
But we're going to keep plugging until it gets there. So if you have anything you want to say to us, any thoughts, ideas, feedback, questions, email us at themergefeastpodcast@gmail.com and we will answer your email on the show.
Absolutely. Well, be sure to check us out on social media and tune in next Friday because we will be back for another episode. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Say goodbye, Logan.
Goodbye, Logan.